What's the YouTube? Dale here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you a Chimera branded profile. No, do not confuse it with branded Chimera, which is all about the branded engine. This one is all about the Chimera engine and then supported by the branded cards themselves. And when we say branded cards, it's literally just Branded Fusion and Fallen of Albaz. So, with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you do not miss out on any more upcoming contents. Also, massive shout out to Rob, who kind of helped inspire putting this deck together to show some different options as well. So diving headfirst into the illusion monsters themselves, we are playing triple Sword Knight and triple Kotal. So obviously the idea is that Kotal gets you to Sword Knight gets you to Chimera Fusion and everything else because it will go through the cards like Gazelle and Baphomet. This is why Branded Fusion can really help you, because Branded Fusion can help get you into this engine as well. Because of a Branded Fusion, what you'll do is you'll send Gazelle plus a Fawn of Albaz in order to make a Rinbrum, and then you'll be able to trigger the graveyard effect of Gazelle. If it is sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, you get to add an illusion monster. So that's how, off of both Branded Fusion or Kotal, you can get your starter, which is of course your Mirror Sword, and then your Mirror Sword will lead you to the Big Wing. Big Wing will lead you into Chimera Fusion and a second form of Gazelle as well. So loads to keep coming from it, which is what makes it incredibly consistent. Then for the fusions, we are playing at triple Chimera Fusion and triple Branded Fusion. So I've already mentioned how Branded Fusion is a starter for the deck. It can also be an extender if you wanted to go down more of the generic branded route, because you can go through stuff like Albion into Mirror Jade and everything else on top. So you're basically adding a Rip One to your end board, plus the ability of going into the Guardian Chimera during your opponent's turn and a Mirror Jade as well. Then, of course, we do play two Fallen of Albaz. Again, pretty straightforward and simple on this one. You need Albaz for the Branded Fusion, and you're not always going to be recycling the Fallen of Albaz back into the deck like you would in a normal branded strategy, because, like I said, the idea is to get into the Rinbrum and then work your way back off of that. So you're not always going through an Albion to spin it back or a Lubellion as well. So Albion to banish it, Lubellion to spin it back, and then move on from there. Then for like the hand traps and just generic board breaking cards and everything else, we are playing triple Kashtira Fenrir. You don't have to play this, but when nothing in your deck really requires you to have an empty board or anything like that, being able to start off with a Fenrir does give you that ability to push further forward, and Fenrir on his own can win you loads of games. Now, we're not saying that is the main focus of Fenrir, but the idea is what you want to do is you want to be able to resolve your first search of the deck, ideally leading you to something like Branded Fusion or the Chimera Fusion, and then get the Kashtira Fenrir search off. You don't want to special summon down Fenrir and then instantly search for the second copy, because with Draw and Lockbird running around in the format, if you get hit with Draw, that's pretty much going to be game over unless your entire hand is pretty cracked. So you need to be a little bit careful about here, but what the idea is you can put Fenrir on the board and then you're continually giving yourself more materials to get into the Guardian Chimera to either draw 2 and pop 1 or pop 2, draw 1, you name it. When you're backing it up with stuff like Mirror Jade and then maybe even leaving a Fenrir on the board, you're adding more interruptions on the board for your opponent, as well as the huge amount of hand traps that you can naturally play anyway. Speaking of the hand traps we're going to be naturally playing, we are going to be playing triple Ash Blossom, followed up by triple Infinite Impermanence, double Nibiru, and then the idea behind the reason of playing Nibiru and Imperm is you're trying to now balance the ability of going first and second without disrupting the natural flow of the deck. So being able to balance the going first and going second, obviously Imperm is a great hand trap for first or second. Nibiru is predominantly a good card for going second, but there are times when they might need to disrupt your board. And there will be some very interesting interactions with Book of Eclipse. So for those of you unfamiliar with this, Nibiru only tributes face-up monsters. On top of that as well, because you're playing a fusion-based deck, you can actually fuse with face-down monsters. So the idea would be that if your opponent is constantly trying to negate your board or anything else, you can ultimately have a Book of Eclipse set, which is why we are maining it, flip their board face down, and then if they continue to summon, you can Nibiru. You can also flip your board face down or the entire board face down and continue to make your plays. You want to make sure that your opponent doesn't have monsters on the board to flip face up. So you'd activate Book of Eclipse first, flip your entire board face down, then activate something like Chimera Fusion to then fuse, and then pop 2 of your opponent's face down monsters so that when they all attempt to flip during the end phase, there's none left that have been flipped by Book of Eclipse, meaning they will not get any more draws. It's obviously a great option for going first if that kind of scenario comes up, but it's obviously also as well a great card for going second, because there are a lot of decks that kind of falter to cards like Book of Eclipse, or you're basically trading Book of Eclipse for one form of negate. Not to mention, we are also playing Forbidden Droplet. So should you go draw phase, Book of Eclipse, and they go change something else, you can then go, cool, change Yourplaymat, send the Book of Eclipse at least one to then negate one monster effect on the field, which could be the monster effect that is tried to respond to negate the Book of Eclipse. Not to mention there are other cards that you can send from your hand to the graveyard to gain you a bit more resource, or just wanting them in the graveyard as well, and that's where Droplet can be very, very useful. We are also playing triple Super Poly, so again, as you can see, all of the cards we're playing, bar maybe Nibiru, are great cards that can either be set during your turn so that they can act as some form of interruption during your opponent's turn, or are also forms of being able to break boards should you have to go second as well. Speaking of going second, we are playing double triple tactic Thrust alongside a single copy of the triple tactics talents. Now obviously Thrust has the ability to get you to a branded fusion should you need access to that. It obviously gives you access to your triple tactics talents, but if you're going first and your opponent has Ash Blossomed your branded fusion, we are also falling back on the option of fusion duplication, because not only can this duplicate your branded fusion, but it can also duplicate your Super Poly as well. So you can technically Super Poly twice in one turn without needing to constantly keep discard in your hand. So that's it for the main deck. There are a couple of other bits you can add in and change around if you wanted to. If you wanted to make it more branded, by all means you can do. I do like the way that the Chimera cards work. I believe that they direct everything a little bit more mainstream, and then being able to be backed up by Albads is really, really important. And then the best thing about this deck is it just has so much flex space to be able to play the hand traps that are required for this current format, because this current format, most of the main meta decks are rocking and rolling with like 10 to 15 hand traps at least. So when you're looking at options as well, you can start main deck and draw a Lotbird if the environment calls for it. You could look at stuff at Bestials if you really, really wanted to. It is entirely up to you and the environment you're taking it to. Moving on to the fusions. So for the Chimera fusions, we are playing the one Chimera the Illusion Beast. This is basically just your board clear and boss monster. We are playing the one Phantom Beast. You don't actually have to play this. This, in my opinion, would be a second Guardian Chimera, because at the moment I only have one. I know, really annoying. But I would probably want to be playing two of this. But that's why I'm also playing Lubellion in the main deck, so that I have more ways of recycling the Guardian Chimera, or of course recycling the Chimera King of Phantom Beast, should I want to or need to. So you have a bit of flexibility there, entirely up to you. Then the one Albaz card that brings this all together is of course Rimbrum. And again, this is another card that in this particular build I would highly consider possibly even playing at 2, just because it's the ideal target. But once you've kind of gone through it once, and that's the one thing the Illusions are really good at, is that they can maintain a lot of very decent hand resource, just because every time your Gazelle goes to the graveyard, which you're probably going to be doing during your turn and during your opponent's turn, you're searching out resource. You're Mirror Knighting into a Baphomet. Baphomet is then giving you more resource back as well, and you're just going around in an endless loop. Then for the other Albaz fusion monsters, we are playing the one Albion, followed up with the one Lubellion, and then of course 2 Mirror Jade. Now you don't have to play the 2 Mirror Jade, you could just play one if you wanted to, but there are times when you might even open up an Albaz, or because we are also playing a Titaniclad, special summon an Albaz during the end phase of your opponent's turn, or even your turn, and then have the ability to contact fuse into a second Mirror Jade. Obviously you can only control one Mirror Jade, but the idea is that you would then be able to Albaz into a second one if your opponent has already attempted to break that board previously that turn. Again, if you wanted to take out a Mirror Jade, that's where a second Guardian Chimera comes into play, just to kind of lean on the Chimera / Illusion side a lot more. And that's probably what I'd be looking at doing. There's 2 spots in here that I'd want to change around, and that's for a second Rimbrum and a second Guardian Chimera. And then we've got 4 Super Poly targets, so obviously you're pretty much generic one of the Garura and Mud Dragon, followed up by the one at Dracus Depelia, and then finally the one Starving Venom. This really comes down to the local environment. If the local environment falls more towards the Guilty Gearfried, then obviously put that in there. But I kind of feel that at this moment in time, especially with the new format going forward, you should be covered with a Garura and a Mud Dragon, and then the Starving Venom is going to be in there for stuff like the Orcus matchup if that starts picking up a bit of heat. But then you still need to be very careful of the Fire King matchup as well. And that's where stuff like your Garura is going to come in even more importantly, because they're always going to have like Beast Warriors that are going to be fires, or if there's 2 types with the same attribute but different types, that's where your Mud Dragon is going to come into play as well. So you're kind of covering the basis on these being the generic card that is always going to be summoned more times than not off of the Super Poly. But you also need to remember as well, Super Poly can help you push through for an OTK. So if there's times when you're going in for damage and you don't have enough to finish the game off, all you need to remember is that a Super Poly can actually help you do that with some of your certain cards being able to lead you into that game. And that is pretty much it for the profile. Like I said, shout out to Rob, who's kind of inspired me to put this together and dust it off and kind of give it a go. And I do like the way that the illusions work in comparison to the branded. Not that there's any issue with the way that branded Chimera works in general, but I do like the idea of changing it up a little bit and focusing more on the Chimera engines because they work seamlessly together. Like both of them lock you into fusion summoning, annoyingly, but that's part and part of it. And then both of them also give you the ability to play more kind of boards. Well, this one definitely gives you more options for board breakers, hand traps, and everything else in between. So that's probably why this is a little bit more relevant for this format, just because it has so much more space to play around with than a normal branded build. Like a normal branded build will probably end up using a lot of the Despia cards and a lot of other cards as well, like the Bestials and everything else, just to kind of keep it ticking. Whereas this one can use at least 50% of the deck to be hand traps or board breakers in one form or another. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you do have any questions, by all means, please put them in the comments down below. I will be more than happy to answer them. But for now, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share. And of course, as always, stay safe and happy dueling.